Hey, what's up? Zach here, and today I've got the all-new Asics Superblast. Here we go. Now, everything about the Asics Superblast is meant to give you the most foam, the most cushion, the most support, while also taking down the most weight. Now, the uppers are a huge component to that. If you look at them under the microscope, you can see it's these textile interwoven with TPU lattices going all the way from forefoot all the way into the heel. And that's pretty nice because you do get the strength of one, kind of the breathability of the other, and also just the comfort of more of a textile upper. And you're not just getting that paper mache or that real kind of hard, light cardboard feeling of some just overly TPU'd uppers. And it is tough to see, but the lace line in here is reinforced, a little bit of waxing. And speaking of lace lines, if you do want a free shoelacing guide, a little bit of shoelacing hacks, kind of free ways to make your shoe a little more comfortable for different foot types, lacing sizes, things like that, I do have a free guide in the description below. What I like about the Superblast tongue, I mean, it's like a real racer type tongue. It's got a ton of breathing channels, but it is also gusseted. Then it does open back up just into the uppers in general at the forefoot, so it doesn't really encumber you, but also gives a little bit of compression around your midfoot. And if you look at this on the breathability test, these things heated up 135.8 degrees, cooled down 62.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Where I noticed the most radiation of heat was right actually distal to the tongue. You could feel the heat escaping from the tongue, but when you put your finger on the top of the shoes, unlike some other ones, you could actually feel your hand getting hot. And at the same token, if you look at the upper durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, the burr does start to work on that upper, outer layer of TPU, but it does not get through the uppers. And even though these are really kind of road racer, kind of tempo racer type shoes, even if you are taking these on trails, with some rocks or dust kicking up on you, I really don't think you're gonna have a huge problem with durability on these. But getting into midsole teardown, this is where I think I spent the most of my time looking at these. Now, this is FF Blast Turbo, this giant block of PEBA type foam or nylon based foam. Kind of similar stuff in a lot of other super shoes, like the Vaporflies and the Alpha Flies, the Primex Strung. Really light, very resilient foam you can get a huge stack on without weighting up the shoe. Now, underneath of it is FF Blast Plus, which you try to look at what FF Blast Plus is, and really all you get is marketing jargon. You don't really get actual data to what the foam is made of. Now, what I noticed is, just kind of from cutting up some other Asics shoes in the past, I found that it does have a lot of the same properties as the Asics Court FF3, which is a tennis shoe. Now, this is an EVA blend here, this blue type foam here. Now, obviously the Blast Plus is a lot lighter, kind of has a little bit less density, especially look at it under the microscope. It does have a little more pores on it. However, just the feeling of it is exactly the same, and the properties are very similar, really resilient, kind of a little bit more of a squish type foam. However, so I would say it may be an EVA blend. You might have some of those cellulose nanoparticles on here, like some other flight foams where they take the wood and biomaterials and then degrade them all the way down to make like a really plush foam. However, the Blast Plus is basically a little bit higher density than the FF Turbo. However, the FF Turbo foam, a little bit more resilient to wear just because of the nylon structure of it. No shank in these, which I think may have given this a little bit more snap, but I think Asics was going for just, light of footedness, trying to get the most foam underneath of you for the least weight. So a decent combination, and for the miles I ran these actually more miles than a lot of other shoes I run in the test. I did not notice any decrease in performance even after the longer miles I was running. And if you look at the Superblast on the single leg jump height test, 17 centimeters, which is pretty on par with a lot of other kind of lighter weight running shoes out there. Number 2, the bounce height test though in the heel, 37 centimeters, and then in the forefoot, 38.5 centimeters, which is interesting because you would think the PEBA or the nylon foam would give it more bounce. However, in the forefoot, where there's less of a stack of the PEBA foam and more of a stack of the FF Blast Plus, you actually get a little bit more bounce. So it just shows that that foam underneath there with that EVA blend or cellulose blend may actually give a little bit more pop than kind of the namesake of the shoe, the FF Turbo foam. And getting into the outsole tread, this is where I think Asics has the leg up on some other shoes in its class. It is a little bit more of a wider set traction pattern with just kind of periphery rubber going all the way from the heel into the forefoot. It is a mostly full-length tread pattern, plus you do get one more kind of stamp pad here right under the ball of the foot for forefoot strikers, not to just wear down all the foam underneath of it. And I do like that because a lot of other shoes now, they're just putting a little bit of foam cutouts in the heel or in the forefoot, just kind of in strategic places using runner data. The problem with that is you leave out all the outliers, and the people that they're studying are more elite runners, whereas the majority of people buying these shoes, people like me who are recreational runners, right, or foot doctors that cut open shoes for some bizarre reason. So I do like you kind of get these entire really thick rails of tread going all the way up the shoe. And in terms of the stability that gives you when running, a lot better than a lot of other shoes in its class, just because you are getting a wider base to run on, but you don't get all of that rubber that's grabbing into hot asphalt or concrete. So you're still getting the ease of glide, but just a little bit more stability. And if you look at the speed ratio, the Superblast, they come in at 4.06, which is nuts. That is a super fast shoe. And even with how bulky they appear just when you have them in your hand or you're looking at them at the shoe store, you know, once you get them on and start moving them, you know, they're really unencumbering. You really don't feel like there's much underneath of you. You do feel like you are sitting in a little bit more of a hovercraft, but in terms of them getting up and going, getting up to speed and keeping at speed, kind of keeping their momentum, these are really one of the best out there. And if you look at the outsole durability test, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. I mean, the burr actually has a really tough time on the rubber portion of these. These are a true road running shoe. Really, I mean, almost a millimeter of damage on a kind of like a 1.5 to 2 millimeter rubber thickness. However, running the FF Blast Plus, I know there's probably a little bit of an abrasion resistance built into this, but the burr just rips right through that. So I would say is, you know, as long as you're keeping it on the rails of the shoe, I don't think you're going to have a problem with durability. I think as long as you're not too much of a shuffle stepper. And getting into the fit of the Superblast, this was the one area that I had some issues with here and there, and my foot started to swell because the gusset is just a little bit narrow in the middle and it is tied into the back of the shoe. If you do have a really wide midfoot, sometimes these can get a little bit constrictive, especially if you're really tying them down for a little bit more of a faster run. So, you know, the forefoot is very wide and generous. No problems in my forefoot with my little bit of a wider foot. I would say, you know, if you are narrow, medium, just go true to size. A 2E, I still think you can just go true to size on these, just get ready for a little bit of a break-in. And if you are wearing like more of a compression sock or a tighter fitting sock, then I don't think you're going to have a problem because you're not going to be getting that crazy swelling in your foot. But I know a couple times I wore a little bit pair of looser socks, and these are a pair of older socks to go running, and that's kind of when I noticed that they were a little bit more uncomfortable. But for the most part, it really didn't have a problem. But speaking of having problems, you know, in terms of the snake bitten foot for heel pain, ball of foot pain, arch pain, these do give a surprising amount of support for a shoe that does not have a shank. Now that's going to start to wear down over time because, you know, there's nothing rigid underneath of you. However, while the shoe is new and while the foam is still resilient, I really don't see a problem. If you do want to throw a low profile orthotic in there, because if you throw a really heavy kind of bulky orthotic, you kind of defeat the purpose of the shoe. So if you want to throw a low profile orthotic in there, I think these last a lot longer and these do well for all those little foot ailments and some of those snake bites you might be getting in your foot. So I'd say when they're new, they're good on their own, but if you want a little bit more longevity, throw a low profile orthotic. I'll leave some in the description. And speaking of the snake bitten foot, if you are someone that does have specific questions or just nagging issues that you've been dealing with for a while, haven't been able to get any answers or good information on, I am beginning one-on-one consulting over on footdoctorzac.com. I will leave a link to that in the description as well. And getting into the runnability of the Superblast, I think the biggest asset that these have is that I could not find a way to make them uncomfortable to run in. If you're a true heel striker, they transition step, like I said, very, very easily. If you're a midfoot striker, they just feel great. I really think, you know, a midfoot striker is where these kind of really do their best work. And a forefoot striker on these do just fine too. I think that little extra rubber pad there, I know it doesn't look like much, but it definitely just adds in just a little bit more stability, a little bit more rigidity when you are coming down the forefoot. Now with the FF Blast Plus and FF Blast Turbo Foam, really, you know, it's going to disperse weight throughout the shoe really easily. So even if you are a heavier runner, lighter runner, they're going to feel pretty similar in terms of a ride. Now, if you are going for longer and longer and longer mileage on these, then I probably would throw an orthotic in them just so the shoe lasts longer for you. However, if you are a lighter runner, I think these are just good on their own, even for a little bit more of a race day type shoe, or even kind of more of a tempo run type shoe. I know that these are built as a little bit more of a racer type shoe, a little more of a high mileage shoe. I would say if you're someone that needs a shoe for a half or a full marathon, these are probably a pretty good pickup to keep one relatively new for that, because number one, they are so forgiving to people with, you know, shin splints, kind of plantar foot type problems, or people that are prone to fatigue, people with lower back pain. So I would say if you kind of keep one of these just a little bit new, broken in enough, but new, I think this is kind of a good race day shoe to have that combination of forgiveness, but also speed. But of course, love to hear your thoughts on the Superblast. Are you going for these or something else kind of in that PEBA or PEBX category of shoes? I'd love to hear your thoughts down below, especially with some of the newer PEBA and PEBX shoes coming out in the market. So let me know down below. And if you want to see a distant cousin to the Asics Superblast going to the knife, the Adidas Prime X Strung, make sure you click into this feed up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you in the next one.